What's up, Browns fans? Spencer German, Anthony Meglin with you here to talk about your Cleveland Browns once again here as we are a week into the offseason. Browns still haven't done very many moves to this point, but they continue to wait for Russell Wilson, so I'm sure there's something coming down the pike here on the quarterback front, as we know. But in the meantime, Megs and I talk you through some things and have some fun, and we have a special show planned today because we are going to we both went through and did a 3-round mock draft essentially, and we had some fun with it. We made some picks. We fixed the Browns offense in some respects, and we'll see what you think of our mock drafts here coming up in a little bit. But we also haven't had a chance, Megs, to react to the Myles Garrett press conference on Friday. We didn't get a chance to sort of do anything with that yet. So we don't have to spend a ton of time on it because it is older news at this point, having happening like 5 days ago. But I wanted to get your thoughts on what we heard from Myles and whether or not we think this is now a point where the fan base can, quote unquote, start to heal from his sort of very public display where he goes on Radio Row, bashes the team, all these different things. And what you thought of the way that everything went down on Friday.
Yeah, you kind of forget about, that's the Radio Row is the one that really sticks out in my mind of like he went right down every single show, Pat McAfee, Kay Adams, like all of them down the line, just saying how badly he didn't want to play in Cleveland. And then he comes and signs back to the Browns, and you're like, all right, I can get past it, right? But I know there's going to be many fans that don't. But regardless, I think we talked about it maybe a few shows ago. Ultimately, when it comes to be September and October, November, when 95 runs out of the tunnel, man, that place is going to be rocking. People are gonna love him. He's going to be on our team, and sometimes it has to get a little ugly. And truthfully, man, like it's kind of like almost like thank you. Thanks for putting the Browns' feet to the fire to like make something happen this offseason, because if we would have sprung ourselves into another rebuild, that would have been a very, very hard 2 years for this Browns fan base.
See, now that's an interesting take because I don't know that I've heard a lot of Browns fans who were like, thank you, Myles, for doing this. I've heard more so Browns fans that feel like he went about it the wrong way. And what I will say is like, listen, like I don't think he'd said anything groundbreaking on Friday. I think there was a couple of times where he kind of talked out of both sides of his mouth, and you kind of are going to get that when a guy says, I don't care about the money, I want to win, and then he takes at the time the highest non-paid or non-quarterback contract in NFL history. But I'm not as worried about that. I think like my statement from the beginning has been, if he wanted the money, if this was about having quote unquote tough conversations, which is what he kept alluding to, I think he could have accomplished that without going to the extremes that he did. Like, I do think he could have, just done what he did at the end of the season and sort of hinted at the idea that he could play somewhere else and maybe force the issue a little bit more than that. Maybe even put the public statement out saying that he wanted to trade. But I don't know that he had to like go on Radio Row and he had to like to draw the line in the sand on like, yeah, I'm not even going to negotiate a contract with you. I think it could have been gone about differently, but he is crediting that move with and saying he doesn't regret it because it got them to a finish line where he gets the money and the team seems to have at least like found some iteration of a plan that enticed him enough to feel like the future's bright. Cause then you get him talking about how excited he is about the quarterback position with Andrew Siciliano, which we'll get to here coming up as well. But yeah, like I don't know that he had to take it to that extreme was my biggest point. But I can understand where sometimes these things happen and it is part of the business, and he got his money and he's back on board. And I do think Friday was a step in the right direction towards healing. I think it was a step towards fans being able to sort of move past this. Now we can debate back and forth if we think like there's more on Myles' shoulders now, if he has to put up even better numbers because of the contract and all those things. But I do think like when he's out there, when he runs out of the tunnel, as you alluded to, September, I think it's like 12th or whatever the day is. I can't remember off the top of my head now. For week 1 of the season, assuming it's a home game, and he, records a strip sack or something, the building's going to not even, this is just going to be a blip on the radar, I think, for a lot of people.
Yeah, blip on the radar, I think it is right. But, there's certainly some credence to that. I do think that, there was an element to this where he came out and stood firm in his trade requests and trade demand, and then realized he had no, like, the leverage portion of this conversation. Like, he had none of it. And if the Browns did trade him, they were going to have to strip everything down just because of the money implications that was going to come along with it. Never mind the fact that he had 2 more years on his contract and 2 more potential franchise tag years, which just ultimately equated to the Browns being just unable to move him. Like that, you cannot move that type of contract. And if you do move it, like goodbye 2025, goodbye 2026, that's when you start seeing everybody get shipped off and it become a total rebuild. Like the rebuild, the likes of 0-15, or excuse me, 0-17, 1-16, something that Browns fans have experienced in the past. But I am like, as it's been resolved, as it's come to this conclusion, it's like, okay, he got his word out. I don't know what they told him from a quarterback perspective. Like, I don't know if they said they're going to go get 2014 Russell Wilson or whatever it may be, but they told him something. And then they also told him, here's $40 million, take it and put a smile on your face.
Well, that's a good place to, I think, pivot into the quarterback part of this equation from as far as it relates to Myles as well, because we know we know he was in the meeting with Russell Wilson. That was reported that he was involved and he was, there. And he even, I thought one of the better lines he gave during his press conference was him sort of, somebody asked him like, what was his pitch? And he said, I won't sack you 3 to 4 times a year. Like, I think that's pretty funny. And it is a line to like go in and be like, listen, if you come play for us, you're not going to worry about me sacking you. So why don't you come play for us? So yeah, I think there's something to be said for Myles being involved in that process. And I think there's something to be said for like Myles they clearly pitched him on something. I'm curious what that is though, because I don't know that them sitting him down and being like, hey, all right, we have a better plan for you. Cause I've been saying, this, Megs, like I've been saying for a while now, there's no way back in January when these conversations were first happening and he clearly first requested a trade that they could give him a set plan. Like there was no way they could be like, hey, we're going to go get Matthew Stafford and then we're going to go get Russell Wilson. And we're like, there was no way they knew that at that time. Now they have a better idea of what that's going to look like. So if they did sell Myles on something, I have a hard time believing that they simply sold him on, yeah, we're going to get Russell Wilson at age 36 and that's going to be the thing that saves our season. Can you help us recruit him? Like, I just don't buy that was it. Now, maybe Kirk Cousins was part of that conversation. I don't know. And go ahead. I was going to say like the Falcons picked up his option for 2026. And so they owed him 10 million more, but that they can still trade him. And maybe they said like, we're going to trade for him. I don't know. But none of those options to me scream, yeah, Myles is now excited about the quarterback position, but maybe I'm wrong.
No, and even the Kirk Cousins conversation too, like, does that move the needle? I wrote about this over on our site, si.com /NFL/Browns. And like, I was like, what moved the needle? Like, I want to know what that conversation we may never know. He may write it in his book in 10 years when, after the Browns win a Super Bowl or whatever the case is. But like, what is the plan? Because if it is Kirk Cousins, like obviously the Falcons know this and there was so much smoke behind that rumor that they just said, screw it. We're going to pay him $10 million. We're going to buy a draft pick. So you better come trade for him, or Pittsburgh, you better come trade for him, because that's what this is going to be. We're not just going to let you have him. So they kind of tip their hand there. And then it's like, all right, are we going to go get Cam Ward? Are we going to go get Shedeur Sanders? Like, does that inspire Myles, or what combination of the two are they talking about? I'm just really curious about this, because in typical Browns fashion, man, like the 1 year where you're really desperate for the quarterback position, like it feels like the well is totally dry. There's no great free agents. There's no great rookies. Like, you're not going to have Jaden Daniels fall into your lap. Like, it just feels like very perfectly Browns that, all right, they're so desperate for it, and the options are like so as bare as it could possibly be. Yeah, and that's what's interesting, right? Because they had to have sold him on something that would like get you excited. Maybe that's one of these rookies at the top of the board. They do have the number 2 pick, so you have some power there in terms of like, we get to kind of dictate what we're doing, unless they sold on Abdul Carter and they were like, hey, yeah, we're going to take him and pay you with a great pass rusher. I don't know. But he was on, I forget what the name of the podcast is with Andrew Siciliano. I think it's like the greatest podcast. I don't know. I forget. Best podcast available.
There it is. The best podcast available. Yeah. I knew it was something like that. And Andrew Siciliano said, like, do you know the plan of quarterback? And he was like, yeah. And he's like, can you tell us the plan of quarterback? And he's like, I can't do that. So he clearly knows what's sort of in play here, what's going to be happening. If they have sort of told him, hey, we're drafting a quarterback at 2 no matter what, that would be what would maybe make Myles smile on the podcast appearance with Andrew Siciliano the way he did, because he'd be excited about the future at that position with something like that. So now you got me intrigued in terms of like where their heads are at with this. But it's another sort of sign to me that quarterback seems to be very much a play, even though, like you said, the options aren't great. There's not a lot of great veterans at this point, especially. The well is very much dry. You're picking sort of, the scraping the bottom of the barrel to find your veteran that you want to put in this room. And then on top of that, like the rookies, we know they all have flaws in some respects. And if you're not getting Cam Ward, then everybody after that, it's like, well, can this guy really do it at the next level? Now, maybe the Browns see it differently, but I don't know. I'm at a point right now where I feel like I see where Abdul Carter makes sense, and I've seen a lot of people mocking Abdul Carter to the Browns, but I kind of just feel like quarterback's going to be the move because, I mean, and here's the other thing, Meg's like, look at the room right now. Your room is Kenny Pickett, an injured Deshaun Watson. That's it. Like, if they miss on a Russell Wilson, is their plan really like Carson Wentz? Like what are we doing? Like, it feels inevitable that they're going to take somebody, and maybe that person's in the second round. I don't know, but I'm just saying, like, they have to get somebody high enough in the draft that you feel like they're sort of paving the way for that position because they have nobody right now.
Right. They're taking a quarterback, right? Like they have to. You have to get a cheap option at the position, and that's what the draft allows you to do. This is the cheapest you could get a good player. So they have to do it. Now, the risk is that people are now saying that, Shedeur Sanders isn't worth a night one pick. Like they're saying he's a second round guy, and it's like he's not going to go in the second round. He's just too big of a personality, and he's had too good of a season. And I think he's a good player. I don't know why the fall off has been so drastic, but you also have to this is kind of the fun part of the pre-draft stuff is like, where's the smoke screen? Who's telling the lies? Who's running the narrative? In the media, because that's all this is right now, is just trying to jockey to get your position. And it's like, yeah, everyone's pumping Cam Ward. Are the Browns, playing, are they the puppet masters in the background? My guess is probably not. But, is that the case? You just don't know at this point. And it feels to me like from what you see, and as we get closer, we'll do some more evaluating of these guys on our channel here. It's like, yeah, Shedeur Sanders fits. It feels like he fits what Kevin Stefanski wants to do really, really well. He's accurate as heck with the football, and he does have arm strength. People are talking about like he's like a noodle arm guy. He's not. Like, he's got what you want, and he knows how to turn programs around. Like that's kind of the name of the game. And regardless if you have the second pick or the 15th or the 30th, like if he's your guy, you're in a position where you have to take him. And it's kind of their hands kind of forced in that way.
The intangibles with Shedeur, I think, are off the charts.
Yeah.
Like, I have no doubt that he'd come in and he's going to be confident. I also have no doubt that like he's going to come in and he's going to work his ass off to prove that he can do it at this level. So like those two things alone have me intrigued by Shedeur. I get some of the shortcomings, but I don't know. Like I'm at a point right now where I feel pretty good about like if they take either of these quarterbacks or they end up with either of these quarterbacks at the top of the board here in Shedeur or Cam Ward, even though I think Cam Ward is the better talent of the two. Which I think this leads us into the fun portion of the show that is going to make up, I think, the bulk of this show. Megs is excited. He's ready to go. Megs and I both did a 3-round mock draft for the Browns. We both had some different outcomes here. We both had some things that we did similarly here, but we had some fun with this. And I will tell you off the bat here to our listeners, I got a little overzealous on the idea of like, I'm trying to fix the Browns offense. I blame Myles Garrett for that, by the way, because Myles had a quote in his press conference on Friday about how he is trusting Andrew Berry to get the offense going in the right direction and find a quarterback that we all have faith in. Those were his exact words, pretty much. I paraphrase a little bit, but pretty much his exact words were something along those lines. And so that got me thinking as I was doing this mock draft and these certain players were there where I was like, man, I have a chance to really fix this offense in like 4 picks if I do this. So yeah. I went overboard probably with the offense. I don't know that it's going to play out this way. And we'll sort of go back and forth here between yours and mine. But my first pick on the board was Cam Ward, who was he was number 2 overall. In my mock, how it played out, because you simulate.
Who went one?
That's what I was going to say was Travis Hunter went number 1 overall to the Titans. So they stayed put, took Travis Hunter. That left Cam Ward for me. And this was a situation, Megs, I know we just talked about both these quarterbacks. this was a situation for me where it was like, listen, if Cam Ward and Shador Sanders are both there too, I'm taking Cam Ward because I think he's the better talent. He's got the higher ceiling. But again, if Cam Ward's gone, I probably would have taken Shador Sanders there if I'm just being totally honest.
Yeah, no, I think that's solid. Flip to mine real quick because I got to Cam Ward in a different way, and mine comes from a position of I think back to 2016. Like there's something that stuck with me. I think Nathan Segura said it, but regardless, in the 2016 draft, the Browns really wanted Jared Goff. They wanted him. They were at number 2 in the draft order. The Rams jumped the Browns, took Jared Goff. And then the Browns ultimately trade back, end up taking Corey Coleman in the draft. And you can see Corey Coleman's coaching college football. Jared Goff just played in the NFC Championship game. So it's like, the NFC divisional round. So like you see that. And I think the Browns brass is kind of scarred from that perspective. Andrew Berry was a part of that draft and knows that, hey, if your guy is there at 1, you go get him. Now, what I will say, I will throw a caveat out there. I did trade, obviously, our first round pick and our second round pick for it. My guess is we are going to have to the haul would be much higher than that. My guess is there'd be some 2026 draft capital in there as well. However, we're just doing the 2025 draft. Yeah. So I told you before the start, 2026 doesn't exist in this specific case study. So that's why we get out of there with just two draft picks in that trade.
What's interesting, I've had some debates with people about like what it would cost to move up. There's really no precedent for a team moving from 2 to 1. That's actually never happened in the draft before, which is kind of crazy to think about. And because of that, like, you don't really know what it would cost. And so it's interesting because like people like if you use there's like the different chart values you can use, right, for the draft compensation. It's like the first pick is worth like 5,000 points. Yeah. And so the second pick's worth like 3,800. And so, or like whatever it is, like it's like 4,000 maybe. Or I think it's, I'm definitely underselling it. I think it's probably like 4,700 or 4,600 or whatever. And it kind of goes down from there. Right. And so people see that and they're like, well, shoot, you can just give up, you can just swap picks and then like, and then throw in like a third rounder and you're good. Like they're going to take that in a heartbeat. But the problem is if you look at the precedent for anybody trading up to 1, you always overpay in terms of the valued points on that chart. You always overpay to get up there because that pick is coveted. You're generally going up to get a quarterback, and the Titans know that. They have all the leverage. And so I've been sort of saying, like, listen, if you want Cam Ward and the Titans are like, we'll shop the pick. And I don't know if that's going to happen at this point because it does sound like the tea leaves are sort of leaning towards them taking Cam Ward. But if they're actually going to shop the pick, the Giants are probably going to call and the Browns are going to call. And if the Giants are like, well, we got to move up 2 spots. So here, take our 2026 first rounder on top of this year's first rounder that we're going to swap. And we'll give you, 2 other picks. Like the Browns are going to have to up the ante because the Titans can basically say, fine, we'll go to 3 and we'll still guarantee ourselves one of Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter if we like these guys, but we're going to get more draft capital out of it. So it's all based off of like the bidding for the pick. It's all based off of like what you're going up to get. There's only one quarterback that everybody is saying is worth a damn at this point. It's Cam Ward. And so if you really want him, you might have to pay a premium to do so. So I'm just saying, I don't know that you'll have to give up a first rounder next year to get there. I'm just saying if they did, I wouldn't be surprised because the Titans can force the issue and they call the shots when it comes to who's going to get the rights maybe to that pick if they decide to shop it, but I don't necessarily think they will.
And what a hell of a game that would be for the Titans, the Titans staff, right? Like, hey, we're just going to tell Cleveland they need to give us 3 first rounders or 3 first rounders and 2 second rounders, and just like screw it, like find the threshold and be like, hey, you're bidding against, let's throw a couple other names in there. You're bidding against the Steelers and the Giants and a couple other teams that want to go get this first round pick. Hey, Arizona just offers Kyler Murray and a first round pick. What are you going to do? Like, you know what I mean? Like they can just, you can throw that out there. It's negotiating 101. I'm not telling our listeners anything they don't know as they sit at their desks listening to us. But like, yeah, I mean, that's the problem you're in at this number 2 position.
Well, where I agree with you on your mock, Megs, like, and I've said this before, if Cam Ward's the guy, like if the Browns, there's been a lot of tea leaves connecting the Browns to Shador Sanders, but if that's all just a smokescreen and they really like Cam Ward, if he's the guy, then yeah, you do what it takes to get up and get him. Like you have to. You're only in this position right now to draft number 2 overall and have the value to trade up even 1 spot be as low as possible. So if he's the guy, you got to try to get up there and get him. I was fortunate enough in mine where he didn't get taken number 1 overall, and so I had the option there, and so I took him. but I understand where for your sake, like you didn't want him to even be an option to be taken by him or somebody or by the Titans or somebody else. So you traded up. And I think that's the philosophy the Browns have to have if they really want Cam Ward that bad and the pick actually is being shopped. So that brings us to well, you don't have a second round pick because you traded it for the Cam Ward pick, but
Mine's out.
yeah, I second round pick at 33. And what I did also making a trade here was I moved up back into the first round and selected Josh Connerly Jr., swapping with Washington, who picks 29th overall. And so the Browns basically move up like 4 or 5 spots, and they get a chance to select Connerly. And after taking Cam Ward and getting your quarterback, you then get a young tackle to pair him with and sort of provide some protection up front. And so you've already addressed like 2 massive needs with your first 2 picks here. And the reason I traded back up, by the way, yes, part of it was like who was still on the board, and I wanted to make sure there would still be some options there for tackle before it came to 33. But at the same time, you want that 5th-year option. Yeah. And that was kind of the idea here and I actually think this is a real possibility for the Browns. I could 100% see them trading back up into the first round from 33 just so that they can get another player that they can get 5 years on and have the time them and evaluate them and all those different things. So I like the move I made there, and I was happy to sort of get quarterback and offensive tackle taken care of as 2 of the bigger needs this team has.
Yeah, and to your point and what you executed here, like you got to remember, and Browns fans remember this come draft night, that Cleveland has a ton of draft capital, right? I think they have 12. Is it 12 picks, Spence? I think I'm putting you on the spot.
They have 10. They have 10 left. 10. They traded 1 for Kenny Pickett, obviously, and they got their compensatory picks all got figured out. So as things stand right now, they have 10 picks.
Yeah, so 10 picks. They're not bringing 10 rookies onto this team, right? So they're going to use this. They're going to use their assets to move up. So it's like, yeah, while this is, in your case, an aggressive trade to get back into the first round, you can be aggressive because you have a ton of capital, especially not only throughout the draft, but within the first 100 picks, right? I mean, even with round 4 being the 104th overall pick, you look at those top 100 spots. Those are elite draft picks. Those are starter level draft picks, and the Browns having a lot of those is going to be huge for their assets and how they look to deal those during the draft.
Yeah, so I liked the start I was off to, and then this is where I was like, man, I'm looking good on offense right now. So I'm gonna keep going.
You're wheeling.
I really was wheeling and dealing. But you also did a little bit as well in terms of like the trades. Although you stayed put though at 67. Which is the first 3rd round pick that the Browns have. So after not drafted in the 2nd round, you have them staying put at 67. I had the Browns trading up from 67. And I'll talk. I want you to elaborate on what you did at 67. I'll kind of explain my move up the board here, but I want to give you some time here to just kind of talk about what you did once the Browns are back on the clock in the 3rd round.
Yeah, I like your strategy better. You have 3 picks in the first 60. I had 1, right? So this kind of mine had vibes of like of fantasy football snake draft, where if you're like the 1 overall pick and then you don't pick again for feels like a half hour and all the players are going off the board. That's what it kind of felt like. But when they landed at 67, you had tackle's a huge area of need for Cleveland. Obviously, the Jedrick Wills experiment has come and gone, and it's really telling the lack of interest in a former first round pick in free agency. I mean, he's not even on the names of anybody, any team. Even James Hudson, a former tackle for Cleveland, got a $12 million contract or something really nice. And Jedrick Wills is it's kind of peeps. It's kind of crickets around him. So that experiment, kind of came and went, and now you're searching for the next answer at left tackle. And I think that my pick here, Ariante Ursery, excuse me, I butchered that. I was practicing it before, but I butchered it. Massive dude, played at Minnesota. A name you're probably not as familiar with, but stands at 6'6", weighs in at 331 pounds. Is very athletic. Had a really nice showing in the at the combine, just in terms of his testing scores. We've talked about the combine. I'm not the biggest fan of combine stats, but his ability to move kind of stands out to you. 5-second, 5.0, 140-yard dash. Not important at all for the offensive line, but just shows kind of his athleticism. A 7.813 cone drill, so he's got that decent lateral quickness. a 4.82 20-yard shuttle. So he can move, he can go back and forth. Where he really was good at in his college days was in pass blocking. He was a very solid pass protector for Minnesota. And then they kind of majored in the zone run scheme at Minnesota, which we're trying to get away from in Cleveland, but he was a good run blocker, could get downhill and do what he needed to do. So at 67, he was the number 1 tackle on the board. And I picked him there because it's just really important position for Cleveland to fill here in this draft.
Yeah, so our heads are in the same place in terms of like trying to find a tackle. It's just we did it in different ways, which I'll kind of go back to my board here for my first pick of the 3rd round, which I did say like I stayed in the 3rd round. The Browns already have 2 3rd-round picks. I used both of them in different ways here, but I moved up from 67 where you made your pick, and I got to 60. Jumped a few teams that could be looking running back so that I could take Caleb Johnson. And I will say, like, when I was on the clock, there was Caleb Johnson and TreVeyon Henderson were both still on the board. Ooh. And I was really thinking running back, and I was torn because my Ohio State loving heart wanted to take TreVeyon Henderson, but I was like, I think the reason I settled on Johnson is he's a more physical sort of style runner, and I think that fits Kevin Stefanski's system. Not that TreVeyon can't be a fit, but I just thought like I'm envisioning like Nick Chubb, right? Like prime Nick Chubb. Like he was just this physical runner who could do a lot of good things. And Johnson ran a lot of like that outside zone stuff that is a staple of Kevin Stefanski's offense. It's that West Coast system with the outside zone. And so I like the idea of like bringing him in and sort of finding your new top back. And I had some pushback on that. I shared this and some people sort of commented like, why would they trade up for a running back when it's a really deep running back class? And I get what you're saying, but I only moved up 7 picks. Yeah. And so in the process, I gave up 60. I moved up from 67. I gave up I got a 7th rounder back from the Lions as well. And I gave up a 6th rounder this year. So it was like a minimal price to pay to sort of move up 7 spots and make that pick. And I felt like, okay, now all of a sudden I have a new quarterback, new offensive tackle, and a new running back all in these first 3 picks. Talking about an offense now that has some like real potential. And so then that brings us to our second picks of the 3rd round, where we both ended on the same player. I took Harold Fannin at 94, where the Browns are currently slated to pick right now. You took Harold Fannin out of Bowling Green at 99. You traded back a few spots and still got him. And I don't know. I thought it was interesting that he was still on the board, but he was there. And I was like, well, shoot, if he's there, I'm taking him. And so that's what I did. But what were your thoughts on how the 3rd round played out, both on yours and what you sort of saw from me?
Yeah, so my trade back was just an opportunity. There was a couple guys on the board that I liked. One of them was Devin Neal, the running back out of Kansas, and that's kind of where I was like, hey, you could go running back here, but I have a not to sound weird, but just like a crush on Harold Fannin.
I just call them draft crushes because like
a draft crush.
Quinshon Judkins is my draft crush. So
yeah, it's 2 reasons why. One, tight end's our quarterback's best friend. I love having a good tight end. He's a beast. He does everything well. 2, he's from Canton. He's a 3.30 guy, just like myself. Went to Canton McKinley High School and was awesome there. Then goes to Bowling Green. Keep him in Ohio. I'm a big fan of Harold Fannin. It's like outside of that stuff. He's a really good player. Proved that he could compete at the highest level. His 2 best games last season were against Penn State and Texas A&M. It wasn't like he was running up his score against Ball State or Eastern Michigan. He was doing it against the best competition and putting it out there on the line for his guys.
Yeah, I think that's well said. I like Fannin a lot too. I think he has a chance to be special. You also got to think like David Njoku is going to the last year of his deal, and he did take a step back a little bit last year as well. He didn't look quite as explosive as he did the previous year when he was a Pro Bowler. So I do think like the Browns could benefit from getting younger at that position and sort of thinking a future. Now, I admittedly, like I said, my mock draft is probably unrealistic in that I don't know that they go all offense in their first 4 picks that we saw there. I think especially after I traded a 4th rounder to move back up into the 1st, the Browns wouldn't pick in my draft until the 6th round again. So they'd have a while to wait to sort of fill some other holes. So if that was how it kind of played out, they probably want to take defense at some point, especially in a year where like there's a ton of defensive line talent in this draft. So I definitely think I probably went a little overboard in terms of like just addressing offense. But again, I got caught up in the Myles Garrett quote about how he feels like there's a good plan for the offense moving forward. And I was excited about the idea of, hey, let's just fix this offense in one draft and make this thing happen.
That's another thing too, Spence. I mean, you were at every single game last year. We watched it. We covered it. We had to talk about a team scoring 10 points again for the 10th week in a row and 17. Like, the offense was horrible last year. Like, let's just call it what it is. And there's a lot of reasons for it. And, you know, the fact that we talked about Harold Finn for a while, but back to the future, if you will, like with Kevin Stefanski retaking the play calling over. He loves going with big tight ends. He has a ton of big tight end packages, whether it be 12 personnel, 13 personnel, like get the tight ends on the field, use them in different ways. So he's going to love that as an option. But this offense was so bad. It was so bad last year, and there's so many holes to fill on it that, you know, I guess part of me would be surprised if the Browns went offense. Part of me wouldn't, because that's where they have the biggest needs. And you know, solving those has got to be paramount for this team this year.
Yeah, I do think defensive line is probably the biggest need on defense right now. You could throw a linebacker into the mix as well. You know, they brought back Devin Bush, we know, but still something that they need to prioritize, especially if JOK can't play this year or if his career, God forbid, is over. Safety's another one, but I just don't think this team prioritizes safety as much as maybe people think. And I honestly could see them, I've said this already, I kind of feel like they could just roll with the guys they have at safety and sort of like a Ronnie Hickman or a DeAnthony Bell fill that void. I don't know that they feel like pressed to draft somebody high, especially high in the draft to fill that need. So yeah, like it feels a little far-fetched that they go all offense. But at the same time, you're right. Like, that was their biggest flaw last year. And we know that most of their holes start on that side of the ball. And and even with this draft that I did, there's still one that they didn't get, which was wide receiver. Like, they still haven't filled that need. And they haven't done that in free agency yet either. So maybe there's a trade that they could swing. I've written about maybe a potential Brandon Ayuk trade. So maybe that's something they could do. But yeah, like there's still some other stuff that they have to address even in this scenario that we sort of laid out here.
Yeah, and that's another, you know, bigger topic that, you know, we could get to, probably not in tonight or today's show, but it is their lack of movement so far in free agency. And now sometimes that can go one of two ways, right? That can be a decent thing, right? That can be okay. Like, you're not really reaching, especially early on in free agency, but you know, you don't want to get into a draft. It's like going to the grocery store hungry. Like, you buy everything when you're if you're in that scenario. But if they can fill their holes in free agency, you know, get guys who can be depth players, which you've seen a couple of, and then you can go and really play in the draft. Like, that's where you want to be. You know, but they're taking the route this year, and they're kind of hamstrung too, right? They don't have a lot of cash to go around, so they can't be, you know, spending wildly. So they got to be strategic. You're not going to get the top of the market type guys, and you're going to have to kind of piecemeal this thing together, and that's going to lead to some holes on the team. Somewhere you can't be perfect. You can just try to be really good at some positions to try to fill a couple of those voids.
Yeah, I do think the moves they've made to this point are practical. Like, I'm not going to give them like an A++ grade at this point. Like, they haven't been able to do much, but at the same time, like, we kind of expected this, right? Like, they're sort of maxed out right now in terms of like how much money they can spend. They're not going to go out and, you know, make a bunch of big deals. But like Cornelius Lucas as a swing tackle makes a ton of sense. Like, they replaced James Hudson, and he's had some really good success. Bringing in Joe Tryon-Shoyinka from Tampa Bay, a former first-round pick. Like, there's some defensive line depth. You added Malik Collins, who I think was like top 7 in, what was the stat? Shoot, I forget. It was like top 7 in like pressures or something like that. Or pass rush win rate. I think he was top 7 last year for defensive tackles. Like, so they are bolstering that area already. They've shown you that they're going to do that. And so that's why maybe they're more inclined to wait on a position like that in the draft, because they have actually addressed some of those needs. Linebackers still could be up there though. So I don't know. Like, I think they've made practical moves and, you know, smart moves for the money that they have at their disposal. But I also think, like, yeah, they're not blowing it out of the water because they don't have a ton of money to spend. They haven't made any of the big signing free agents because most of those guys just were always going to go somewhere else. But yeah, like, that's just kind of the state that they're in right now. and there's still plenty that has to play out, most notably at the quarterback position.
Yeah. On that topic, Spence, we didn't talk about it. We won't have to spend a lot of time on it. What's your hot take? Not hot take, but initial take on T. Higgins getting paid, Jamar Chase getting paid, and the Bengals addressing.
And I could do a whole dissertation on this. I listen, Jamar Chase, you were going to pay. I have no problem. Like, it makes sense they would pay Jamar Chase.
Yeah.
I'm assuming they probably had to spend more than they wanted because Myles Garrett jumped the gun on signing, and they were like, well, shoot, we already promised him the highest paid non-quarterback, and now we got to pay him more. So I'm sure they weren't happy about that. But I just don't get paying T. Higgins. Like, first of all, if Joe Burrow is the great quarterback he is, yeah, like, you want him to have a good weapon. You have that in Chase. Why not get younger at the position? I don't understand. Yeah. Like, you're going to lose maybe Trey Hendrickson over this. You're going to lose other players over this, and your defense was awful last year. The T. Higgins one is what gets me. It's not that I don't think T. Higgins is a good player, but like,
I think he's fantastic. Right?
You can't pay everybody. Like, you can't pay every single receiver. Like, the Browns knew this. They weren't going to pay. I get it's different ages, but like, they weren't going to pay Amari Cooper. Like, they were like, sorry, we're not paying you. So like, you gotta. I don't know. I felt like they would have benefited from just like getting younger there and using that money elsewhere. But I don't know. They're trying to make it work. They're trying to figure it out.
They're running back an offense that, scored a bunch of points last year and went 9-8, right? You have this window, right? You got everything you ever wanted, right? You got the quarterback, you got the guy. If he is really the guy, you need to supplement the rest of your team. Your defense couldn't stop a nosebleed, man. And hey, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm just being a hater. There's certainly a potential for that, but like, I just doesn't make sense to me. Like, it feels like they made the move, like, this is gonna sound weird, but like, just for vibes, like, just to keep everybody happy, and they signed everybody.
Yeah. Well, they did it to keep Joe Burrow happy,
right?
But like, you could have kept Joe Burrow happy, I think, with Jamar Chase and maybe like addressing wide receiver in the draft. I mean, I know this isn't the best wide receiver draft, but I don't know. It just felt strange to me. But that's just me. Speaking of windows, though, I do think another reason why I believe the Browns are going to go quarterback at number 2 is because of the thing that they keep sharing on social media like every week, which is the stadium. They keep sharing the stadium plans and like giving you updates and all this stuff. They're trying to sell this thing hard to the fans. And you know what? The only thing that'll really sell to the fans is if you get a quarterback. And so I think I'm not trying to be like conspiracy theorist guy, like I'm reading into everything, but like they know that when they want that stadium to open in 2029, they want this team to be in a place where they're competing and they have that position figured out. So this is your chance. Get the quarterback right now, and in 2029, they'll have a very long wait list of people trying to get season tickets.
Absolutely. That place is gorgeous. I have been firmly on, like, this dome is awesome. I cannot for the life of me understand why people look at that place and be like, this is bad for Cleveland. Like, I'd rather be on the lake.
They're taking the Browns out of downtown, Megs. I mean,
it's a mile away. It is 10 minutes from.
Well, and from what I understand, I think the city of Cleveland owned that land.
What's that?
Point. I think the city of Cleveland owned that land at one point. And then the Ford plant closed, sold it. So like, they literally had that land in their jurisdiction, and it would have still been Cleveland. And just because it's on the other side of the border of not Cleveland anymore, people are like losing their minds about it. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Insane, especially Spence. Go ahead.
I don't need to hear like the BS about like, well, what about all the Sunday game day stuff and blah, blah, blah. Like, do you understand that like they couldn't even keep the West 6th tailgate going this year because they had security issues and they couldn't fund that.
It wasn't safe.
That's what I mean. Like they couldn't even provide the infrastructure to keep that going. Mm-hmm. What makes you think that like they're really, I mean, there probably is like an economic impact in downtown, but it's like that economic impact would just move to Brook Park. Dude, it's okay.
Guess what? People are still going to stay in the hotels. You can still go to West 6th Street and party before, because guess what? It's like 10 minutes away. That part's crazy. And especially, dude, as we like embark on March Madness here and you're getting into the springtime, like when the lakefront property, when our stadium goes dormant, nothing happens in it for the next 6 months, nothing happens in it. But now you build this dome. Guess what's going to be there? A Final Four. Guess what's going to be there? A concert. A lot of concerts. Guess what's going to be there? whatever
Maybe a
happens.
Super Bowl, yeah.
Would be a Super Bowl there, for heaven's sakes.
Well, and that's the thing. Like Cleveland's maxed out at this point. The events that they can hold. They've done the draft. They've done All-Star games. Like the one thing, the biggest things are now all that's left. And in order to get those, you need a venue that can do that. That can hold them. And this is what that is.
And I would also say this:
it's a good thing for Cleveland and the Haslam's. I mean, listen, the Haslam's are going to get their money back because they're probably going to have. There's going to be PSLs. Like, just accept it now. That's the harsh reality of this, is that there's going to be PSLs, but like they are generally privately funding a good chunk of this. Like they're not leaning on the tax dollars to do it. So in that regard, like there's a lot of wins in this scenario for everybody involved. And it's just like political bullshit that's holding it up.
It's wild. There a couple things. I'm not going to stand on the table and say the Haslams are awesome owners. I think they do some things well, some things maybe not.
They've done plenty wrong.
They spend money, dude. They spend money. They put money. They want this franchise to be a winner. They want the city of Cleveland to be a winner, and they're putting their money where their mouth is. Yes, they do plenty of stuff wrong, for sure, 100%. But they're about to put over $1 billion into a brand new stadium that's going to bring so much to this city. I think if it's executed even 50% of what these videos and renderings show, this is going to be a masterpiece. Unfortunately, it's in Brook Park. Bummer. Sorry about it. It's 10 minutes.
And I'll end on this. Like, and I get, like, all these people who are arguing like you're taking the Browns out of Cleveland. It's like I guess, but it's not like they're taking them to San Antonio. They're taking them like down the street.
They're not going to Canton. They're not going to
the idea that they're taking the Browns out of Cleveland is just asinine to me. I don't understand it. It's just absurd. But anyway, that's a fight for another day. A fight that luckily we don't have to have behind the scenes, because it seems like it'd be very nauseating and headache inducing. I would not want to be part of those conversations. But anyway, we appreciate you guys listening. We appreciate you guys stopping by. Let us know what you think about our mock drafts. You can hit us up on X at Spencito_ at ADMegs_10. If you want to let us know your thoughts, you can also comment on this video at the Cleveland Browns on SI YouTube channel. And of course, read any of our written content at si.com/NFL/Browns. But make sure you subscribe if you haven't done so already to our YouTube channel. We're trying to grow the audience, trying to do more of this stuff, and trying to keep the conversation going with you all season and off season long. So for more content like this, hit subscribe. For Anthony Meglin, I'm Spencer German. We'll be back with plenty more Browns coverage. Maybe they'll sign a veteran quarterback this week, and we'll have something to talk about. We'll see. But until then, take it easy, Browns fans, and we'll talk to you soon.